anybody else come in that wants to join us. We were a little late getting onto YouTube. We were there just before 7:30. So we'll just give it a couple of moments to allow other people to get in. I can see there's a few coming on now, so we'll just give it a couple of moments.
Yeah, other people might be finding the same thing. They're not getting the actual magic.
And what I'm going to do is just mute everybody off on Zoom.
Right. The link that he's given.
Okay, everybody. Well, I think we're ready to go. We're live on YouTube. I see we've got people watching us on YouTube. Yeah, so you just mentioned there that people may not be accessing the link on the current YouTube. I think what people need to do is if they're coming into the YouTube channel, they need to click on the live stream. So it says live stream or something similar for this. But yeah, they are finding us. We've got people watching us now. So I think we're working. We're up and going. Good evening, Philippa. Good evening, Reg. Good evening, John. Good evening, Alan. Everybody on Zoom, everybody on YouTube. Great to see you. Thanks for joining us this evening. And I'm delighted to welcome Linda Gautrey, of course, one of our council members who is going to be talking to us this evening. I hope that you're all well and that this dreaded virus hasn't visited itself upon you. Of course, things still very strange in the way that we're having to meet. But it's great that we can do this online. Technology is a wonderful thing, isn't it? So at least we can gather together and at least we can have our meetings. And the plan is, we had a council meeting earlier on this week. The plan is not to have a meeting in August because now with lockdown being lifted to some extent, many people are wanting to escape and get on holiday. And we weren't sure of numbers and people are away now, for example. But we will be back in September and hopefully, everything crossed, Phil Dainty is going to be talking to us in September. You all know Dr. Phil, member of the Society for many years, and you know that Phil's talks are always excellent. So he'll be kicking off the new season in September with us. But the plan is for now to continue with the online meetings. And of course, we're monitoring the latest situation, following government guidance until we can get together in a room all together again. We'll continue to have our meetings online. And hopefully you find that although it's not the same as gathering together, certainly we don't have the social side of it, hopefully it goes some way to replace the meetings that we're not able to have face to face. So as I say, we're extremely fortunate to have Linda with us tonight. And Linda's going to be talking to us about myth and magic. And I'll leave Linda to introduce herself, but Linda's a council member of the Society. And it's wonderful to have her on board. And it's great to see her giving a talk. You'll have seen her give talks over the last couple of years as well. So it's great to welcome Linda back. So without further ado, Linda, I'm going to hand over to you for your talk, Myth and Magic.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm Linda Gautrey, it's pronounced, but never mind.
Sorry, you know, you can take the lad out of the Black Country and all that.
That's all right. I'm used to it. I've been called all sorts. I'm a retired teacher, so there are. Yeah, I've been fascinated by the background behind animals and plants, and how we know about animals and plants, and about the legends behind them, and lots of the myth and the magic all together. My background is biology, so natural history has always been a fascination. And what I'd like to do this evening is share this fascination, the stories behind some animals and plants. Only a few, there are loads and loads, but I've got a good reference book if anybody wants to read up a little bit more. Now, we've always known that over the history of time that animals and plants have been used as food. And it's perfectly obvious, really, the things that we can eat. But my fascination is the other uses, the medicine, that side of things. And I'll link it to talks we've had before, and also with what's going on at the moment. So that's where I'm coming from. I'd like to just start with, oh, it's not going forward.
Go on, give it a press, Linda.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to want to go forward.
Is it not? I'll tell you what, come out of your presentation.
That might have frozen, might it?
Yeah. Come out of it and then just try it again. Technology, it's a wonderful thing.
I love that. Apparently something's going on in the background as well. It's kept things from me, but now tell me. Yay, thank you.
How's that? Okay, there you go.
That's it. Seems to be okay now. So we'll start with some flowers. I've always been fascinated, as I said, by why they're called various things, and also why it is that we use them in different ways, and why they've got different legends and myths attached to them. Clover is one that we all know. Clover, we know, has been around, used as good luck. We've got expressions like living in clover. It's used as a charm against evil. But why? Clover is actually the Latin for club. So that doesn't really give us any clues at all for why it is we associate it with good luck. One of the reasons why we think is because of its association with bees. And we know even now that bees are really, really important to us. And we've always known that. So bees, importance, but the luck side of it probably stems from the four-leaf clover, this very rare example that appears every now and again. Most of the time they've got the 3 leaves, but every now and again you find a 4th leaf, and that is said to be lucky. So we think that that's where the lucky part of it comes from. So that's clover. Okay. Another one we know of is willow. Now, willow as a tree, we know now as a source of aspirin, but it's in the willow bark. So why would it that people would have chose to take willow bark to use as a painkiller? That's lost in time, because using willow and plants like meadowsweet has been around a long time. The Druids used meadowsweet a lot. We saw this in the canal talk, the last talk. Meadowsweet's found along wetlands. And this plant, along with willow, has been used a lot all the way through. Druids used meadowsweet to make their bedding sweeter and the floor sweeter, smell nice. And also it's used in various ways as painkiller. But that leap going from just seeing the plant and using it for a source, using it for something as a purpose, I just find fascinating. How did we first do it? Well, the main way is trial and error. It used to be thought that only humans ever used plants for medicinal purposes, but now it's been shown that there are lots of animals that actually do as well. So perhaps we watched other things eating these plants and saw that it was okay, and we tried them. Trial and error. And I'm sure the error very much resulted in a lot of illnesses and deaths where different people tried different products. We know they've been used 5,000 years ago. The Sumerians used things like laurel and caraway and thyme. Chinese medicine has used herbs for a very long time. 2,700 BC is some of the earliest records. And we know Egyptians used them, and we know Greeks and Romans used them. With more recent times, well, recent, I'm talking about sort of the 1200s onwards, people have used something called the doctrine of signatures to find out if things are any good. And with that, something like lungwort is called lungwort because apparently it looks like diseased lungs. So they use this in preparations to help people with problems with their lungs. I'll leave it up to you whether you think it looks like diseased lungs. It looks a bit green to me, but anyway. Nicholas Culpeper in the 1600s wrote books about herbs and how to use them. And his books are still used today. Now, he linked this doctrine of signatures along with the science of, oh no, I can't use that word, astrology, okay? He used astrology and all these different ideas, he linked them together. And actually the book is still in use today and still being published. Going on to a different plant and a different sort of myth associated with it. We all recognise daisies. Daisy comes from the Old English day's eye. So daisy, day's eye, it's a corruption of those words. Bellis is its Latin name, and this relates to a forest nymph. Now, these forest nymphs were being pursued by, hang on, Lecherus Vertumus. Never very good with languages, but he's a deity who guards orchards. So this god was pursuing these forest nymphs and being really sort of not very nice. So just in time, they were turned into daisies. So daisies are actually forest nymphs been turned from whatever to avoid being, well, I'll leave that to your imagination as well. Another bit of myth that goes with a daisy is that as soon as you see the first daisy of the year, you're supposed to cover it. I don't know whether anyone else has come across that myth. And its reason for doing that is that you're trying to avoid dying by the end of the year, because if you don't cover it, then basically the daisies will be covering you. Bringing up the daisies is another sort of legend or myth that people possibly have heard of. Okay, very familiar plant, the dandelion, Leon, I suppose it should be pronounced. And these are called because of the, as you can see on the leaves, they've sort of got teeth on there like lions. That's why they called it. And again, these plants were actually sun-loving fairies that have been changed into dandelions, because they basically couldn't find anywhere to hide, so they changed themselves into the dandelion. The dandelion clock is actually, it's not so much when you blow on the seeds and you find out what time, it's actually triggered by the opening and closing of the flowers. They open and close based on day length. And there are lots of plants that do that, and gardeners use those to make floral clocks. Okay. And I don't know, I mean, normally when you talk to people, you'd be able to see if they've heard of this one as well. But we were always told when we were growing up, and I grew up in the Northwest, that if you pick dandelions, you were going to wet the bed. I don't know if anyone else has heard that one as well. But basically, or is that just a northern one? I don't know. But basically, there is all these myths and legends. There is some truth in this one, because in the sap, there is a mild diuretic. It is mild, so it wouldn't really cause you to wet the bed, and you'd have to really drink a lot of the sap in order to do so. But there is some truth in that bit of myth. Okay. Back to the doctrine of signatures, and it's quite clear that these pansies are heart-shaped. So they're often called heartsease because they're used to treat the heart. Again, there isn't as much science in that one, but you can see the heart shape, I hope, sort of. And they've also got heart-shaped leaves, sort of, as well. But a lot of the plants, they were actually shown to have signs. For example, St. John's wort, a very common plant, very powerful plant, was so powerful that it's got loads of little holes in the leaves because the devil didn't like it so much because it was so powerful. So put lots of little holes in to make it a bit weaker. Lots and lots of little stories around different plants. Culpeper, as I said, he used all this information, put it in books, still being used today. And it was only really, he was around in the 1600s, it was only really the 1700s and after that, when science was really getting to grips with proper experimentation, that they really found out that some of these herbal remedies are worth it and do work, and some, there's not really a lot of science in them. Here's another one where there is science in them, the foxglove. The foxglove is called for all sorts of different reasons. They reckon because the little flowers fit on the feet of the fox. Okay, I don't know if anybody's ever seen foxes wearing them like that, but anyway, that's why they're called it. But its Latin name, digitalis, is linked to the drug digoxin, which is in them, which is affects the heart, and it's been used as a heart medicine for a very, very long time. And again, perhaps small amounts where they experimented or found out, and it did affect the heart. It's also associated with, I can never say this word, xanthopsia, which is a colour vision deficiency. It means you see a lot of yellow. And the reason for this is because the digitalis, the drug that's in there, the chemical inhibits the way the eyes work. So you see a lot of yellow. Vincent van Gogh was actually treated for his mental disorders with digitalis. So perhaps it might explain why in his later years, all his work was very yellow. I've read that sometimes some people say that's true, some people aren't sure. Okay. The poppy, we know all about the poppy. We know how it's used as a symbol of peace because it was one of the first flowers that appear in the fields of Flanders after the First World War. So we know about that side of it. We also know that the certain poppies contain very strong chemicals, the opiates, and all the problems that have come with those. Now, I want to use that as really an example of how lots of these plants have got these chemicals in that we can use for our benefit. And there are lots of plants out there that we still haven't really explored. So it really is an extremely good reason why we should protect our environment and make sure that we don't lose any more plants or animals than we have done already. I'd like to talk about a few animals now. We know about the myths surrounding magpies. We know about one for sorrow, two for joy. Now that is often slightly different in certain parts of the country, but in essence, it's the same, one for sorrow, two for joy. I don't know whether people realise these are extremely clever birds. We know that now. They're part of the corvid family with crows and rooks. And one of the things that we know they do is collect shiny things. And we think because of that, the Victorians were really fearful of them. They thought that the magpie was a bringer of really evil doings associated with the devil because it's black and white. And they actually nearly hunted them to extinction. During Victorian times, there were very few. Also, it was said that they wouldn't go into the ark. They would just sit on the top of the ark and just shout profanities and swore at the world as it drowned. So they don't, Christianity didn't like the magpie. However, before that, they were often associated with really good luck and good fortune in lots and lots of different groups of people. The Romans, for example, recognized their intelligence. The Greeks related them to Bacchus, the god of wine, and in Native Americans believed that by wearing their feathers it made you stronger. So, this group of birds, the magpies, lots of different myths and legends surrounding them. Okay. Now, as I said, one of my fascinations is how ideas change over time. And this is a really good example, the eel. Now, the eel, I don't know how many of you have ever tried to eat eel, but eel has been a very, very important food source for a very long time over the whole of Europe, not just England. So it's been really important, so it's very well studied. Now, we now know that eels have got an absolutely fascinating natural history. Their life, they start off in the Sargasso Sea, right in the middle of the ocean, and they lay their eggs there. And then as elvers, as tiny little hair-like things, which is the picture at the bottom, they swim back to the European rivers and then spend quite a few years and years in the mud, growing and maturing gradually until they swim back to the Sargasso Sea and breed again. Absolutely amazing. But that has only been known very recently. Do you remember spontaneous generation that I talked about in another talk? Eels prove that spontaneous generation is true. It means what they said and they believed, everyone, scientists believed for a very long time, is that life could arise from non-living matter. Eels were a great example because basically eels could be found in mud. And no matter how hard they looked, they could never find an eel that showed any gender. They couldn't find any of the sex organs in the eel. So they didn't think they reproduce, they just arised in the mud. And if you remember, Aristotle was the first person coming up with this idea. And really it was well into the 1600s and beyond that this theory carried on. Antonio von Leeuwenhoek, he was the person, one of the people who did lenses so that he could use microscopes. And he was one that was really trying to find out about the eel. In fact, loads and loads of scientists studied the eel over the centuries. In particular, at one point, Italy was absolutely obsessed with them. Leeuwenhoek reckoned that the eel was like mammals and they actually gave birth to live young, just like mammals. And that's because he observed eels with tiny little worm-like things coming out of them. It was shown and it turned out that they were parasites, but anyway, they still didn't know. Going on to the 18th century, Carl Linnaeus. Now he was a scientist who's very much to do with putting animals and plants into orders. So he did taxonomy and he organized animals and plants, and most of his way of working species is definitely we'd still use. He also thought that they were like mammals or like other fish, that they gave birth to live young. But unfortunately, it was found that he wasn't actually looking at the eel. He was looking at a close relative, the eel pout, a different type of fish. And then in 1862, David Cairncross. Now, he wasn't even a scientist, well, not a proper one. He was an engineer. Sorry, engineers. Okay, but his main love was engineering. But then he observed that there were eels, and he found this, what we call eel hair, which is like in the picture with the hand. He had this eel hair, and it was actually found with beetles. So of course, in the mud, he thought eel hair, beetles, they've got to be connected. And watching the beetles even more, he could actually see some of these little worm-like things coming out of the beetles. So he said that the beetles gave rise to eels. But again, if he'd have had more science friends, they'd have told him, no, they're parasites, sorry. So again, 1862, still didn't know about eels and about whether or not they could breed in the usual way. And then we get to Giovanni Grassi a bit later on, and he was in a group of Italian scientists, loads of them, again, as I said, obsessed with eels. He, after years and years of dissecting all these eels, found that they did have sex organs. Now, over the time, these eels have been put into all sorts of absolutely awful experiments. It was rumoured, and people said that they ate peas and beans and other pulses. And this was because a countess in the 1600s accused eels of eating all her peas and beans. So they got all these eels, put them in a big tank, fed them peas and beans, and lo and behold, there weren't as many eels left at the end of the experiment. The eels ate each other. And in fact, all they ended up with was one great big huge eel, which didn't really help them at all. Grassi found that it took time. They actually changed through their life. And about the fourth big change, they change and get the sex organs. And that's really why they hadn't seen any sex organs in all the times they were looking. He even suggested, which is quite a step forward, that eels must breed at sea, because this change, he watched them and they could actually live in salt water. Again, he found that out by testing them. And so he actually suggested that, but it wasn't until much later, the 1900s, that Schmidt actually, traveling to the Sargasso Sea, did stumble across them and found that that's where they bred. Still a lot's not known about eels, which is quite fascinating. But again, if you want to find out history about, fascinating history about a certain species, there's loads and loads more to find out about the eel. Now, the way medicine works with animals, or rather Chinese medicine in particular, Chinese medicine sort of suggests that things like, if you want to be tough and macho, then you should eat something that's tough and macho. So that's why the tiger sort of is in a lot of Chinese medicine. You eat a little bit of it, you become tough. But which bit do you think they eat in order to be tough? There are still loads of places you can go to in China where you can get and eat tiger penis soup. And that's apparently going to help you become really macho. So ladies, I wouldn't suggest it. I wouldn't suggest it men either, because there is just no science behind it at all. Chinese medicine believes that lots of parts of animals will cure or influence us. And there's hardly any science to go with that. But unfortunately, because of that, there are lots of animals endangered. Here's another one I'm sure we all know. But really, would you eat your hair? Because basically, rhino horn is the same protein that makes up your hair and nails. Now, if anybody does want any help, it's supposed to be an aphrodisiac. If anyone wants any help, I've got plenty of hair. I still haven't had it cut off. I will send you some if you wish. Okay. But they actually use in Chinese medicine the horn for headaches, fever, hangovers, and impotence. But the aphrodisiac was actually put away as a rumour And unfortunately, this rumour got out of hand, and that's why even more rhinos were killed just to get this aphrodisiac. So no science in that at all. That myth, it's just myth. But unfortunately, there's a lot of Chinese medicine that still exists, and the rhinos are becoming extinct because of that. They're very endangered. Another animal that's in serious trouble, okay, is the bear. And in Chinese medicine, again, they use bear bile to treat the liver and gallbladder problems. They reckon that that helps. There's no science again involved at all in that. But this cruel practice, they actually use it, and they use the product, and it goes into things like shampoo. It goes into, hang on, my dog's barking outside a lot. I'm just going to throw in something. Ned, yeah, that worked. But that, they use bear bile to treat these things, but they actually use the products, and it actually goes into things like shampoo and wine and tea. So it goes into a lot of things in China. And really, there's loads of other things they can use instead. There's no need to use it, and there's no science to say. The bear paws, they actually think treats impotence. And again, I don't see any science, can't find anything to prove that that can actually work. In fact, what they have shown is that bile taken from ill bears can spread a huge disease or cause illness in the people taking it. So there is a lot of risk taking that. And there are a lot, thank goodness, for the tiger, for the bear, for the rhino, lots of organisations trying to stop these cruel practices. Okay. Peacock, as picture at the beginning, beautiful bird. There's lots of different myths and legends that go with the peacock, mostly of religious significance. In Christians believe that it's associated with rebirth, because the peacock was one that refused to eat the forbidden fruit. And then because of that, it was rewarded that its flesh would never decay. I don't know how that's an advantage, but never mind. But so all the way through, it's been used as an association with resurrection and with paradise and with things like that. However, there are lots of places where it's bad luck to bring the feathers into your house, because apparently they're the eyes of demons. So lots of different theories with that one. I'd like to move on to one that's a bit weird. Not that some of the others aren't weird. Okay, the beaver. Now remember, beavers been widespread across Europe as well as North America. So we've had beavers around quite a long time. And really in the 12th century, beavers were gentle creatures, okay, that would, now wait for this, bite off their testicles and throw them at the hunters so they could escape. Now, why on earth would you do that? Well, it's because the testicles were taken from beavers. In fact, that's one of the main reasons they were hunted, is for them, so that basically, again, they could be used in medicine. How on earth did anyone find out how these could be used in medicine? No idea. But actually, there's a little bit of science truth in this bit. Beaver tails have been shown to cure headaches. Now, I'm not suggesting that you go down to the chemist and ask for some, but you could actually ask for the material, the chemicals that are in there. Just bit at the base of the beaver's tail are the musk glands. Lots of animals have these. And in the beaver, there are lots of chemicals that are stored in this gland, one of which is salicylic acid, which is, of course, aspirin. And they know that because they're eating the wood, salicylic acid and lots of other chemicals, really interesting chemicals, are stored in the musk gland. So the beavers have been hunted for this gland for a very long time. But even into the 1670s, you know, they still believed that beavers bit off their own testicles and threw them at hunters. So again, not sure how people found this out, whether somebody went along and ate them, who knows. But all the time I'm reading about all these different animals, I come across a guy called Thomas Brown, and he was around in the 1600s, and he was a sort of myth buster. And he went round finding out about these myths and then experimenting to find out whether they're true or not. For example, we all know that, or perhaps we don't, but ostriches are known to eat anything. So he tested it out and he gave them lots of different things to eat to see if they'd eat them. And sure enough, most of the time they did. He even gave them sort of big iron pellets. He put pastry around them to make them a bit tastier, but you know, he gave them to them and basically they ate them. And of course, we know birds do that because of their gizzards. They often take stones in anyway, but he was testing it out. And again, he researched and tested the information about beavers, but he got a bit mixed up, and he named them castor. Their Latin is castor, because he thought that was linking to castrate, but it actually was just misunderstanding. He misread some Egyptian hieroglyphs, and castrate actually means musk. But anyway, we've got those words for a different reason. Now, the musk glands then, so the chemicals they found in the musk glands have been used to treat flatulence, toothache, and women's issues. And really in the 16 and 1700s, a lot of women would find these places to buy, where they could buy this material, castoreum, so that they could actually treat their women's problems. Now, I think that they decided that perhaps castoreum isn't a very nice word, so they called it something else, and they called it grass. That sounds a lot posher. And this substance has even been added to vanilla to enhance vanilla flavouring, and has been used widely in America in US foods. I did do some research to try to find out if it was still being used, but I couldn't be sure on that one. So something to watch out. So that's why they were hunted, making sure that, you know, getting all these different chemicals. And there's actually a lot of other important chemicals found in there. So that's just quite an amazing creature to find out about. Now, another unlikely creature that I did some research about was the frog. Now, frogs have been associated for a very long time with fertility, because we all know that when, you know, straight after floods and things, frogs appear. That's just the way they do. They appear out of mud, spontaneous generation again. And so they've been associated with fertility. In medieval times, right, now, I still find this quite amazing every time I read it and think about it, but in medieval times, putting a frog in your mouth was a form of contraception. Yes, you heard that right. Putting a frog in your mouth, contraception. Now, reading it doesn't say male or female, it doesn't say, but I think that would put anybody off. But anyway, I don't know how that worked or how they came up with it, but it's the link to this link, as I say, to fertility. In China in the 1950s, so that's not that long ago, the government actually promoted the swallowing of a handful of live tadpoles as birth control. So that was a government thing. They were encouraging women to take a handful of live tadpoles and eat them. Now, that was a bit of improvement, because the traditional way is to cook them first in mercury. So I think eating them live. Perhaps that helped in lots of different ways. However, that didn't last long. In 1958, they actually declared it didn't work, because they actually started collecting data, and they actually found that 48% of the women who were trying this, 48% of women just became pregnant. So it didn't work. So again, frogs really important in that way. Okay, back to, as I say, linking to the spontaneous generation. Aristotle thought they were a really good piece of evidence for it. Now, there's been lots of different experiments with frogs, and again, using them with spontaneous generation. Kircher in 1665 used them as proof, and he had loads of mud and put water on, and sure enough, frogs appeared. So he showed that, and everyone thought, yay, he's right, great. Okay, moving on, Jean-Baptiste van Helmont. Now, he's a Belgian scientist. Now, he did lots of experiments. In fact, he showed that plants needed carbon dioxide in order to increase their biomass. So he's one of the first to show that carbon dioxide was involved in photosynthesis. That's a different story. He actually, for this side of things, he actually got bricks, made holes in them, and he put basil in them, in the holes, and he found that scorpions appeared. So he made scorpions. Yeah. And also he was one of the ones, if you remember the experiments where you've got a vessel of some sort, a flask, you put some wheat in it, a bit of water, you cover it in. Now, what I read recently, it's a skirt of an unclean woman, and mice appear. So these experiments were going on, and loads of other quite bizarre, which to us nowadays just seem laughable. But of course, don't forget, microscopes hadn't really got off to a big thing at that time, so we couldn't see that detail, didn't know about a huge amount of things. So spontaneous generation. Okay, Reddy, if you remember, he was showing us lots of different experiments, and Thomas Brown, as I say, was very much involved in all these experiments. But I want to tell you a little bit about Spallanzini. Now, I don't know whether you remember a talk I did a while ago. Spallanzini, again, was somebody trying to prove that spontaneous generation was correct. But in doing so, he actually showed that there were the sex cells, the eggs and the sperm. And he used frogs to show this. And the way he did it, he got loads and loads of frogs. And we clearly see that the female frogs lay eggs. That was clear. You could see that with your eyes. But what wasn't really as obvious was what was coming from the male. So what he did was he made little taffeta trousers for the frogs. He made loads of them. He actually experimented with loads of different types of material first. So he put the females and they laid the eggs. He put the males with their little trousers. It's just mind-blowing. And he put them together and he showed that the eggs never came to anything. He took the trousers off the males and sure enough, the eggs did develop. So he actually showed that the males were producing the sex cells, and he could actually see them with the really good microscopes that were around at the time. So that was quite an important step away from the spontaneous generation theories. But also at the time, and in fact, actually, I'd like to move to the 1960s, the African clawed toad was used a lot for showing pregnancy. Before the toads were used, rabbits were used. And every single time they were used, the rabbits had to be killed and dissected and looking at to see if the eggs were being produced in response to the chemicals in the women's blood, or the urine. But frogs could be reused. So they could use African clawed toads to show pregnancy. And it was the only pregnancy test that was actually around at the time. So that was then meant that African clawed toads were spread around the world and used a lot. Unfortunately, they also carried disease with them, which got out into the wild. And that's one of the reasons that frogs are in a bit of a trouble around the world. Okay, lots and lots of different things there. Still with the frog bit. We know that frogs and toads produce chemicals on their skin. And again, these have been used for lots of different purposes. For example, the poison arrow frog or the poison dart frog, they use the chemical in order to put onto arrows, and this is used to kill prey. But what they also found in certain frogs was that if they were licked, they produce a high. The people then would get high, and they would be able to visit their gods and do all the other religious things they tended to do when they were, sort of not themselves. I remember talking about drugs to a group of a class that I had, and one student, quite rightly, it was because I'm always interested to know as well, asked, well, how did they find out that that actually happened? That could happen. And before I could say anything, another child said, well, you see, what happened was these blokes were out walking. It's probably blokes, wasn't it, miss? Probably blokes out walking. And one of them happened to just fall. And as he fell, he happened to fall on a frog. And we're going, what? You mean to say he fell? Yeah, and he just happened to be talking, so his tongue was out at the time, so he happened to lick, and then he thought, wow, this is really good, everyone try this. And so when we'd all stopped laughing, we thought, hang on, perhaps that's not really right. We then worked out possibly it was because they were using it, putting it on the arrows, and we all know as we're doing things, we lick our fingers, and that's probably what would have happened. But I still have this vision of these people walking around and suddenly falling over and falling on a frog. Who knows? It might have been. Okay, so myths and legends. Okay, should I carry on? I've just got a few more sort of myths and legends of different flowers, just to give a little bit of a taster. And there are loads out there. I like this one because I'm also fascinated by dragons. You might be able to see some in the background. This is the lily of the valley. And we all know that the lily of the valley is one of the first flowers of spring. So it's often associated with all the gods and goddesses of spring, especially in particular in Norse legend. But in Christianity, there's a legend that Sir Leonard and a dragon were fighting. This dragon, incidentally, was called Sin. So I think you can guess where the story sort of comes, and you could see where it's coming. So they fought fiercely. The dragon conceded and crept off. St. Leonard, though, was grievously wounded. And as his blood hit the ground, it said that that's when the lily of the valley bloomed. A nice story, perhaps. I love that picture. Is it real? Is it not real? Carries from my myths and legends. Okay. Another one, the elder. This comes from Danish folklore, as well as I think it's got into English folklore as well. But elder, Mother Elder or Holder lives in the roots of the elder. And if you don't ask her permission when you take that elder down, you've had it. She will come and she will actually find you and kill you. So you've got to make sure you ask permission. So that meant that in lots of places, elder wouldn't be used as a wood especially for making things like cradles. And then, of course, there are the extra legends that you can, instead of asking permission, you can, if you cut it down, you've got to spit 3 times and then you're okay. How on earth, why they'd come up with that, I don't know. But there's lots of different ways you could get around it and use the elder. But there's still a lot of places that won't use elder as a wood nowadays at all. Okay. This is another one that is in many parts of the country. This is forget-me-not. And it's all to do with self-sacrificing and foolish love. And this is because the legend goes, a young man was walking alongside the river with his sweetheart. And he saw these flowers and she saw them. And he said, gosh, they are just the colour of your eyes. They are beautiful. And as he bent down to pick them, he slipped and fell in the river. And the last thing, of course, he said was, and I could make up something daft to make it as a joke, but since I can't hear anyone laughing, I'm not going to. He just said, forget me not. Okay. Oh, thank you, Simon. I was going to make up something like Aston Villa 0, Everton 1, but I haven't seen if that's the result or not.
Yeah, no, that would have been a joke.
That would, yeah, probably would have been. So forget me not. And that story is in a lot of different places. So obviously it's been shared over the years. But just a couple more. The lilac is Persian for flower. And for some reason, in America, if you wear lilac, you're going to remain unmarried. Okay, perhaps that's what's happened to me. I really like lilac. I've got lots of lilac. Anyway, sorry. Okay. And lastly, the lily. There's loads about the lily. Lilies are associated with Eve's tears. And so there's lots and lots around there. Okay. So just really like to finish. Oh, I meant to try to go back there. Go back, leave that image. If you remember from the last talk, there was also lots of other plants named and mentioned. Things like eyebright is a plant that's used to supposedly to treat eyes. Belladonna is one that they use. A tiny bit of the chemical to actually put in eyes to make the pupils dilate. And that's really risky. It's very poisonous, but it's been used a lot. Skullcap, feverfew. There's loads and loads of plants with associations with medicine. A lot of them have been quite dismissed for a long time because herbal medicine, culpepper, associating it with astrology, it's just a bit of too much of a myth and not really science. But there is a lot of science there, and they're finding out a lot more and using a lot of these plants. And really what I want to just finish with is something we should think about. These myths, the ones that did become science, there are a lot of things out there we haven't discovered yet. And you just never know what is out there. There could be a cure for all sorts of things. And so that's really important. One of the huge reasons why it's really important that we need to protect our environment. You might be wondering where the magic is in all this. Well, to me, the magic is in the research I've been doing. It's fascinating. The magic is in the learning. The magic is in the knowing, the finding out, the asking the questions. The magic is in the science, looking at things. And if anyone does want to read any more, I can definitely recommend this book. Okay, it's called The Unexpected Truth About Animals. It's by Lucy Cook, and I can put that on our Facebook page if you want. That is so good, so entertaining. I've only just read part of it, and it's just so good. I got a lot more information after I started my talk. I got a lot more information from this book about the beaver and linking all of about the frog and the beaver, and there was another one as well, the eel in here, and there's loads more. Definitely recommend that book. Okay, hopefully that was okay.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Linda. That was fascinating. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. Well, I think we've learned a lot this evening from that. I still like the idea of the toad and your pupil.
Thank you so much.
Perception.
I thought that was excellent. The question I've got, then you found out, let me just mute everybody off. What I'm going to do, folks, is mute you off because we get a lot of interference. So bear with me a second. Let me mute everybody. There we go, and then you can unmute yourselves as we go. Linda, if you can just unmute yourself, that'd be great. Okay. Yeah, I was going to say, of course, if they fell over and accidentally licked the frog because they knew that was going on, like you've said, from licking their fingers, then how do they find out it was poisonous on the arrow in the first place?
Trial and error.
You know, just the thought. It's real chicken and egg stuff, isn't it?
They probably saw animals eating the frogs and dying, or animals don't eat them and wondered why and perhaps just tried. It's got to be, it is. It's fascinating.
But it's like like you just said about the belladonna plant as well, isn't it? It's I was thinking, well, how do they find out that dilates your pupils? But of course, that would be from touching it and then touching your eyes, wouldn't it?
Possibly, yeah.
The way that came out.
Yeah, because they're not obvious food plants, so that you wouldn't you wouldn't have tried them anyway.
I mean, it's like aspirin, isn't it? Why chew on the bark of a tree?
Yeah.
You know, who did that first? Crazy.
They were using, what was fascinating, they were using mold to treat sores and wounds for a very long time. Well, we now know mold contains penicillin or certain types of mold.
Yeah. So it's amazing, isn't it? It kind of come from just one point. It must have evolved over time. Yeah. These things, you know, you wouldn't just go straight to and use it. I guess it's something that just evolves and is passed down from generation to generation until you reach the point where it's that does that.
Yeah.
Right, which I guess that the myths part of it then is what's left behind, isn't it? From how you've done that process, the myths part then is what's left behind when you've proved that, let's say, the one plant dilates your pupils. There must be a lot of things along the way that you kind of discard, but some of it still gets retained. I wonder if that's the myth.
Yeah, and if that does that, then what can that do? So that sort of leads you to look for something else.
Yeah, wow, it really gets you thinking, doesn't it? Has anybody got any questions for Linda? If you've got any and you're watching on Zoom, put your hand up or unmute yourself. John, I think you just unmute yourself, so you've got a question.
I was just wondering, Linda, if the deck of cards clubs come from the clover leaf shape and clover.
It could be, yeah, it
and
could
also,
be.
When I was very young in Cosley, dandelions were always referred to as wet the beds.
Really?
Yeah,
we were always told that up in the northwest as well.
The Cosley in the northwest, I presume.
Must be, but I think it's in lots of places.
Yeah.
I did that one as well, Linda. I think people were nodding their heads on Zoom, so I'm assuming that must be quite a common one in the Midlands and the northwest.
Yeah, I think everywhere, lots of places. Then, yeah.
Did you know, by the way, there's a lot of trafficking in elvers these days? They're so valuable in the Far East.
Yeah.
The eel population is being seriously depleted in British rivers because they're catching them by the hundredweight and exporting them to the Far East and getting a massive amount of money off them. Yeah.
I know, it surprised me.
Species,
Yeah, it surprised me how important elvers, and eels have been.
Let's just hope that current events put a focus on medicine in the Far East and what hocus pocus it is, and controls it even more.
Education is helping. There's more and more. What they're trying to do is go round in places like China and saying, look, this is not working, this doesn't work. And so more education, as more people are educated, it is sort of slowing down. It's not being used as much, hopefully.
Fingers crossed.
There was a shop in the shopping centre in Stourbridge, Chinese medicine place. I don't know whether it's still going or not. Quite a large place as well.
I wonder whether the Chinese ought to be taught evidence-based medicine.
Well, if you think about it, that's where this latest virus has come from, isn't it? From their misuse of animals.
Yeah.
You started off with a daisy, Linda, and called it Day's Eye. I wonder if this is to do with the way it tracks the sun.
Yeah, it opens only when the sun is at its sort of.
Yeah, but not only do they open, but they also, the flower heads will actually orientate themselves as the sun goes around. They sort of bend in that direction, don't they?
Have you seen those wonderful floral clocks where they have different plants that open at different times? There's one called Jack Goes to Bed at Noon, and sure enough, at 12 o'clock, this plant, it looks like a big dandelion, closes up. It's also called Goosefoot, I think it is as well. But it's amazing. You can, set your watch by it.
On our lawns this year, we've had some. We let the grass grow, and we've had these lovely yellow type of not dandelions, but similar small things. I think they did the weather forecasting better than you, Simon. They would always close when there was no sun.
Yeah, that's not going to be hard though, Alan.
And they would track the sun. You could actually, if you didn't know where the sun was, just look at where they were all pointing, and that would tell you where the sun was.
It might be nipplewort.
Yes. I'm not sure what they're called, but anyway, the goldfinches like the seeds off them, so it was worthwhile leaving them growing.
I hope it is nipplewort, Linda, because then I can use that in the weather forecast.
I'll check. It's a very common sort of dandelion type.
The perfect excuse. That'll wake people up.
The dandelions don't do it in advance, do they?
That's right. Never mind that. You can't have everything, can you, John? Has anybody else got any other questions for Linda? No. Linda, that was very interesting. Thank you for taking the time to share that with us. And Everton, have you seen the score?
No.
Do you want me to tell you?
Go on. Was it 0-0?
No, it was 1-1.
1-1?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
So you were close, just one off. So yeah, it was far better off doing this, wasn't it? Than
yeah, I recorded it. I might watch it.
All right. Okay. Listen, thank you for sparing the time, and it's been really kind of you to do that.
I like doing it. As I say, I've enjoyed the research. That's part of it. That's the magic of it.
Well, I was going to say that's one of the things that we can tell is your enthusiasm for the subject is really infectious. So thank you for that.
Wait till I do the Wales one.
Yeah, I was going to say we look forward to your next one, which is on to Wales, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wales, the country, but Wales as in the mammal.
Yeah. Cetaceans.
Excellent. Well, when we're back to normal, or is it an online one possibly at some point in the future?
I can do either.
Okay.
It's November. It's down as November, so.
Okay. All right. Well,
whatever I can do.
Let's hope that we're back to normal by then, but I have a feeling perhaps we won't be quite there just then. But thank you anyway for tonight. That's been excellent, Linda. A reminder, as John was mentioning earlier on, that comet Neowise is visible in the skies at the moment. John, am I correct? It's in the southeast, isn't it? And it's close to Jupiter and Saturn. Is that correct?
Fairly low. It's heading towards Ursa Major, which isn't just the Big Dipper, it's the whole of the constellation. It's roughly north-northwest direction.
Oh, north-northwest, is it now?
Naked eye.
Yeah. Right, okay. And so it's clearly seen, and it's got a tail on it as well, isn't it, John?
Yeah. I say some of our lads went up to the Long Min to look at it the other night.
Yeah, I was just
actually outside. They lived at Cannock, and they always travel up to the Long Min to do their observing because it was nice and dark.
I was just looking at the satellite picture because we've got some breaks coming through here now, but it looks like there's some more cloud coming in the next few hours. But it may clear tonight. It may be possible to see it tonight. But I've got a feeling it might be Saturday night.
But it's also heading towards the twilight as well.
Right. Okay. So we've got to see it in the next few days, really.
Yeah. Really. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the other
John,
one.
Can you see it on the on these phone apps? These astronomical phone apps.
No idea.
Oh, you don't know. Okay.
No.
You might, Alan. You might. I think you probably will be able to because they do plot them on there. But my understanding, and John, correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is when you see it, you really can't miss it. That it's the comet.
I'm assuming there's clouds are going to stop us seeing it.
Yeah.
Seen some great pictures, great photos taken.
Yeah.
Go on, John. Sorry, you were saying?
I've seen some decent ones our lot have taken just with a smartphone.
Yeah. You're quite right, Alan. I think it's cloud really tonight and tomorrow night is going to be the problem. But I think come Saturday night, even better, probably Sunday night, that's when we get some nice clear northwesterlies coming in, and that will clear out the skies. So the skies should be clearer then. So my money would be on probably Sunday night and Monday night to get out and
Need
see
a fairly good northern horizon. I've tried from my back room, but the northern horizon's too high. I couldn't see it the other night.
Right. Okay. The other things to look at, John, which is why I mentioned in the southeast, you've got Jupiter and Saturn there at the moment.
Saturn and Jupiter are fairly close together, roughly south or southeast, something like that.
Yeah, and they're bright as well, aren't they? They're very bright.
Yeah. And it's a good year for the planets because they've got such long period of orbits. Once they disappear from you, you don't see them for another 100 years or so. You know.
Yeah.
Mars is going to be visible fairly soon as well. That's going to be a good object.
Really, Mars is coming back as well.
Yeah.
When's that, John?
I'm not sure offhand. Let's have a quick shuffle in my book for July.
What I just say that when you're looking for planets, you can't miss that they're Jupiter and Saturn, because stars twinkle, planets tend not to twinkle like stars. Right. So you can always tell what's a planet and what is a star. Stars twinkle classically as we imagine it, but the planets tend not to twinkle. They're more sort of steady light.
Yeah.
And of course, all this astrology helps, as I've said, doesn't it? It sort of links and helps our moods.
Yeah, don't you bring that in, Linda. I'll set John on you. All right, don't you start with that. But Mars is a good one as well when it comes close, because it's red and it's visibly red as well, so you can't miss it. Have you got it there, John?
Mars is rising in the east around midnight. That's around about the 6th of July. So we should be getting there. Intermediate in brightness between Jupiter and Saturn. During July, Mars brightens from magnitude minus 0.5 to minus 1.1 as it travels through Pisces. So it's getting brighter as the month moves on.
Yeah, brilliant.
Minus 1.1 is a good magnitude.
Yeah, absolutely. So you could be seeing Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars.
And Mars, yeah.
All in the same night.
The moon gets in the way of Saturn and Mars a little bit, but that's up to the 4th of July. That's gone now.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find out where Mars is in relation to them. You could see them all in the same night, though. Yeah.
Brilliant, excellent. So lots to see this month and next month as well. Super. Yeah. Thank you for that, John. Appreciate it. And thank you again, Linda. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you, Linda.
Yes, thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
It has been excellent, and the recording will be available on YouTube in the next few hours. I just have to go and do a bit of editing, and then it'll be available. So we'll get that up on the site as well. So if you know,
can you trim my hair a bit?
Yeah, of course, I'll touch it up, Linda. Don't worry. You don't, Linda. You need no improvement.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. So I'll get it on there. If your friends haven't seen it, please do send them to the link to the talk. And then it's there and it's open and it's available for everybody to watch. If you've not subscribed on YouTube yet, please do so, because that helps us with the YouTube algorithm and to get a good URL name for the society. But otherwise, have a great summer, everybody. It's lovely to see you. And thanks for joining us this evening. And thanks again, Linda. Night, everybody.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.